Wel do, Richard Mulcahy, ydw i, a dwi'n gweithio yn y tîm diwygio anghenion dysgu ychwanegol, neu ALN yn Saesneg. Fy ngheidweithio hwn ydy Paul Williams o'r the same team. As is obvious, dydw i ddim yn siarad Cymraeg yn rhugl, dysgwr ydw i, ac dwi'n ofni iawn o camera ar phobl yma'r. Sorry, Jonathan, ond... Wel, rhaid i mi trio esbonio y cynigion defwraethiol o Llywodraeth ar y foment yn yr papur gwyn copiau sy'n ar y fwrdd. Rhaid i mi weithiau siarad yn Saesneg achos I'm not going to be able to think of all the words. A dydw i ddim yn gallu meddwl yn Gymraeg, wrth gwrs. It's a good question whether I can actually think in English, but I certainly can't think in Welsh. Anyway, dyna fe. Beth yw rheswm am gwaith diwygio? Mae llawer o bobl sy'n meddwl a dweud bod y system cyfredol ddim yn gweithio. Mae llawer o tystiolaeth o'r cyrff sy'n cynnwys estyn, swydd yr achwilio ac eraill, bod y system yn aneffeithlon, araf ac yn gostus. Y gair mae o poblogaidd y ddisgrifio'r system ydy ymladdfa. It's a fight. You all know as well as I do that that's how more parents see the system of SEN assessment and statementing as a fight, a battle. Mae Llywodraeth Cymru wedi cyflawni I ddiwygio proses SEN ar y rhaglen llywodraethu yn 2011. Ar ôl cynlluniau pilot yn 8 awdurdod lleol, cyhoeddwyd dogfen ymgynghoriadol. Nawr, dyn ni wedi lansio ymgynghoriad newydd I esbonio cynigion ddefwriaethol I proses newydd ar gyfer plant a phobl ifanc gyda'r anghenion dysgu ychwanegol. Mae term newydd hefyd anghenion dysgu ychwanegol. Dim SEN ond ALN yn yr cynigion yma. Mae cynigion hwn yn rhan agenda ehangach I newid tirwedd neu SEN. Dyn ni'n dechrau rhannu gwesi yr system PCP, Person-Centred Planning. Does dim cyfieithu syml I Gymraeg o PCP. Mae'n flin dy fi. Anyway, rhannu gwesi gyda'r ysgolion awdurdodau a phobl eraill fel yr consortia rhanbarthol. Mae PCP yn angen ymdrech. No, I've written that and I don't think it means what I want it to mean. PCP is about a group effort, not about one person fighting another authority or a third specialist. It's about looking to the things that are important to the child and important for the child. It's about looking at what is working and what might need to change. This is the famous individual development plan that we've been piloting over recent years. It's also going to be important that we develop the workforce. I suddenly wish I had a much bigger podium as I realise you are the workforce. This is about, if we're going to have a more holistic system, I will try not to use the word holistic again after that, we need to make sure that people understand what it is that the system wants them to do, or more importantly, what the young people themselves want it to do. And that will involve not only SEN coordinators, but various other members of staff, and crucially, the senior leadership. In primary schools, it may be relatively straightforward to bring a head teacher into the discussion as to how we use PCP. In large schools or secondary schools, we're going to have to make a special effort in order to get the senior management teams on board. So you can start that. You are the Senkos mostly. I'm sure you can go and persuade your heads of the importance of person-centred planning. Don't worry, we'll give you some information first as well. But if we're developing the workforce, we need to work out what the skills are, and that's part of some work that's being done by colleagues at the moment. You've probably heard about the Masters in Educational Practice, the framework for specific learning difficulties, and the work on the autistic spectrum, or the action plan. I can't give you much more details on those because they're being run out of different teams, but these are fairly key parts of how we're trying to get the system to work more effectively. Ein amcanion. Dyma cynnwrdebau'n cynigion, gweledigaeth y papur gwyn. Dyn ni eisiau weld fframwaith unedig ar gyfer plant a phobl ifanc gyda anghenion dysgu ychwanegol. Dyn ni eisiau weld asesiad a chynllunio sy'n actio yn gynnar. We need earlier intervention, earlier recognition. A dyn ni eisiau weld systemau deg ar gyfer gwybodaeth a phryderon. Ni eisiau weld system mwy syml ac effaillon. It's too complicated, people tell us. It takes too long. Nothing happens when we have a meeting. We need to create something that is more effective, that works more quickly, but crucially, which doesn't tie everybody up in endless meetings or multiple forms, but simply deals with the problems of the people in front of you. There's no point in the perfect system that has 25 levels to it. It has to be quick, it has to be easy, it has to be explainable to the families, and it has to make sense not only to you, but even to the child or young person involved. Dyma'r cynigion o'r papur gwyn, 220 cynnig yn yr papur, ac mae 10 pennawd yn y talk yma. And this is definitely where my Welsh stops, because the technicalities of explaining these is just simply beyond me. I am very sorry about that. The first main one, which, to be honest, in the year or so I've been in this post, I've heard more than anything about the value of a good and effective code of practice. We will create a new one. There will be a duty on Welsh ministers to consult on and issue a code of practice. That's no change to now, quite honestly. But the difference is that the code will have, or can have, mandatory requirements as well as the general guidance that is currently in the code. I realise that most of you here out of schools and the education sector. Clearly, lots of people have different views on who should be doing what and when. At the moment, the code only recommends. Once we have a new act in place, we would hope to be able to instruct, to say this is what you must do, and this is what you may do. So there will be more teeth in this code than there is at present. The other phrase which has caused me a lot of trouble in the past year is that of due regard. At the moment, authorities and others only have to have due regard to the code. That will change because there will be requirements. It will not be that the whole code is mandatory. It will be a mix of mandation and guidance. But there will be direct instructions within it. Or if ministers consider that it's necessary to do so, I just need to put that in to keep the lawyers happy. There's also the fact that we can issue, or the code can cover people that aren't simply local authorities. There will be involvement of health boards and others in this, There's only so far we can go in instructing some people because their founding acts, the NHS acts, don't necessarily allow us to tell them to do things. However, we can bring them much closer together, and certainly when it comes to process, try and get them to engage in a way that perhaps they don't always do at the moment. As I said before, we want to change the terminology. My daughters now are 13 and 16, but particularly in primary school, when you go in and you hear what kids are calling each other, the word special is quite a remarkable insult in its own way, given that its meaning is the direct opposite, something to be looked after, something to be cherished. It almost seems that it became something odd. So we strongly believe that we need to change the terminology. We move away from the term special educational needs, which we've had since 1981, and come up with something different. Additional learning needs is where we ended up with that. How far have I gone? No, sorry, I've taken myself too far, confused myself. Have additional learning needs, anghenion dysgu ychwanegol a darpariaeth ddysgu ychwanegol. They will replace what's currently in the Act about SEN and SEN, special educational provision. We know that those are simply words, that changing that and revisions to the definition do not change anything in themselves. But we believe that the unfairness that's developed over the years with regards to SEN, the way the term is used, much in the way it seems to me the word spastic used to be used. I think it's about 10, 15 years since the Spastic Society stopped calling itself that and changed its name to Scope. We really are at a similar position with SEN, and so it's time for it to go. And it shows that things have changed, we feel. In England, the new Act, which is coming into force, retains SEN, special educational provision, as its definition, even though it's now creating the education and healthcare plans. But nothing else changes. We feel it's important to change that because that is a major difficulty, we feel, for a lot of children and indeed for their parents. The IDP, which we've trialled already, originally when we put this out in 2012, I think there was an understanding that this would be, if you'll excuse the phrase, one plan to rule them all. That it would replace just about everything, or at least involve just about everything. We still want it to be the centre of this, but we recognise that there will sometimes be other plans that can't simply be absorbed, particularly where there are detailed health plans or social service plans. They should all recognise each other, but we don't need to have just one plan for everyone. This can be as complex or as simple as the needs require. It will also, for the first time, go beyond age 16, and indeed below the age of 3 or 4. That this will provide a level of protection that doesn't currently exist in the post-16 area. It will replace the personal education plans for those who are looked after and also have additional learning needs. Annual review, much as at present on statements, but because these will vary according to each individual's needs, that shouldn't mean that you're having to drag everybody in for a lot more meetings. As you can tell, my life as well spends too long in meetings, which is why I keep saying we don't want any more of them. As I've said, the age range will be extended and various duties upon local authorities and upon schools, institutions and other settings. Just worth mentioning that, as in the current law, the duty to set out a plan and to provide what is set out in that lies with the local authority. We're not moving it to schools or to consortia, or at least that's not our plan. It lies, as it always has done, with the local authority. And so the authority will obviously still have a key role to play and will still need to be looking after the overall needs of its pupils with additional learning needs in the way that it should be doing now. I've talked briefly about PCP. As I'm trying to explain it to lots of people at the moment, I could talk about it for quite a long time. But putting the learners at the heart of the process, which is the, if you like, the sort of political description of it, is about stopping this belief that SEN at the moment is done to you. You can't be SEN until somebody has filled in a form, until you've called out the EdPsych, until. What we need to do is recognise the needs of the learners, whoever they are, whether their needs are great or small. They need to be involved in the discussion of their needs and what they want done. They need to be involved from the beginning, along with their parents or carers, or the corporate parent in the case of LACS, to discuss and to agree as much as possible. I know this happens in very many statements anyway, but we're trying to put this down clearly. And there needs to be a sharing of information. We all know the dangers of inappropriate sharing, the protection of data and all that goes with it. However, we also need schools to talk to each other, local authorities to talk to each other and to their consortia. Occasionally even some of them will want to talk to us at the Welsh Government. We need to know what is working and what isn't. Whether something that's being done in one school could be easily done in another school, rather than something very complex that they're doing there. We need the information, and that's a constant complaint, I know. You're always being asked for information to fill in this, that and the other. I know in the school which I'm involved in that they get asked for the same thing 15 different ways. Well, maybe 4, but it feels like it. This is about getting the data together so that you're not always repeating yourself. And on the same logic, we need to have effective multi-agency working. Again, it's a phrase that doesn't exactly trip off the tongue. Well, on mine it just trips. We need to get people to work together. There are new approaches to a duty to collaborate, to cooperate, and to share information. Some of that's already there and will be restated. Some of it is new. We want new ways of delivering multi-agency working. I won't say there's no point, but how much time do individual SENCOs spend in trying to set up meetings for someone from the GPs, someone from the specialists, someone from the authority, and then the parents and all the others, trying to get them together to one meeting, the day of the meeting, and then someone cries off because something else is happening. That's not an effective way of getting things done. There need to be better things than constant meetings. Sorry, I'm back on that again. And so we need to get the right people in the room. We need to have the right information in the room so that the right decisions can be taken. And again, we're extending this to age 25 and that also, as I said, means below compulsory school age as it is. So we need new ways of involving those involved in early years working. There's been a lot of work done on that recently, but how we connect that into identification of additional learning needs. I mean, some of them will be obvious, but others may be easy enough to deal with at the age of 3 and 4, rather than picking it up at the age of 10. So we need to work out the best way of doing that. And I've probably already said this many times about avoiding duplication. We can't just keep repeating ourselves time after time. Though if you were listening to this presentation carefully, you'd probably find I had. When I talk to people involved in SEN at the moment, it seems to me that many of them say, well, there's no point in disagreeing with what somebody wants, because if it goes to tribunal, we'll lose anyway. Now, naturally, the tribunal tells me that's not the case, but the reality is that nobody wants to go to a tribunal anyway. You know, whether you strongly feel that something should or shouldn't be done, or whether you're simply stuck in an argument. We need to get these things sorted out more easily, more quickly, and with far less pain. We need to encourage better dispute resolution arrangements. Those already exist in the law and the current code. We need to strengthen them. We need to look again at how the advocacy work is done, setting out requirements. I happen to think a lot of Snap Cymru, but I also know that some people think that they work for one side rather than the other. You know, if advocacy needs to be suitably neutral. And so we will take another look at that. That's a difficult area. If you attempt to take away or give the impression of taking away someone's right to appeal, there are human rights issues in that. So we need to work out the best way of doing it that will allow quick and effective dispute resolution without necessarily having to go to send to every time you disagree. And as I said, the right of appeal needs to be extended in this case to up to 25, but it has to be backed up with the more informal dispute resolution processes first. This is all the long technical about what is and isn't included. Centu likes to have clarity over these things. And finally, the specialist provision. This was originally in the Education Wales Bill, but largely people felt that it didn't belong in there because it was an SEN matter and should be in the ALN bill that we were already planning. So this could have already been law, but it's not. It's sat back with us for the next stage. At the moment, we, that is colleagues about 3 desks away from me, deal with post-16 specialist provision. This isn't something that sensibly belongs at central government. It's something that sensibly belongs with local government. You've been dealing with the children from at least the age of 4 or 5 to the age of 16. They're going on to specialist provision then. Why should it then be sent to a bunch of people in Cathays Park when the local authority has much better background on it? Our aim is to have a code by the time the bill is introduced into the Assembly. That may well be, well, the official line is that it will be done before the end of the current Assembly term. The Assembly is wound up or dissolved or whatever the current legal position is in April 2016. That's 2 years away. Anything that we do put in would have to have gone through all the relevant Assembly stages by April 2016. I can't officially tell you when the date of introduction might be, but say it takes about 6 months or so to get a bill through. That will give you a rough idea. And of course, we need to plan for the transition. My English colleagues have recently been sending me a whole range of things on their transition planning and how it might affect people in Wales. Luckily, we can't find a lot in it that will do that, but there's an awful lot of transition planning being carried out there. We need to look at what we will do, the timescale in which we would introduce it, how the work on person-centred planning, which should be carried out before the bill is completed, will affect this. So, my colleague Paul, who has been stood here quietly for the past half an hour, wondering when I was going to stop, is actually somewhat more expert on the details of some of these areas than me because he's actually written the thing.
I don't think that qualifies me as an expert necessarily, but you know.
Well, it's yes. Which also means, of course, if you have any problems with the grammar, the spelling, you can ask Paul.
I think you proofread it, didn't you?
Yes, okay. I was trying to keep that quiet. I did spot a mistake in the Welsh version later, though. So, if there are any questions, we'd be happy to try and answer them as far as we can. I realise that you would be more comfortable asking questions in Welsh, a lot of you. However, I'm not sure I can think quickly enough to translate to get you an answer before we leave. So it would probably be simpler from my point of view if you did ask in English. I do apologise for that. I know it's not good practice, but I did try, and I'm not sure, I'm not sure I could try that much, but that much more. So any questions? Yes.
Yes, I'd like to ask about the role of consortia in this. The white paper is based on the work of 8 authorities that did a phenomenal piece of work in order to gather information, data, trial, all sorts of things. That was done pre-consortia working, when you had local authorities that had lots of people to be able to do these jobs. The lie of the land has changed dramatically in 2 years. Local authorities, or in terms of people on the ground, are, I mean, the workforce is much smaller.
Yes.
So there are 2 issues really. Are you actually consulting with consortia how to make this work across all of Wales? Because that emphasis is on local authorities.
I think, yeah, that all comes down to the legislative position. Obviously, these are legislative proposals, and in legislation and statute, consortia don't exist currently. But clearly they do have a fundamental role to play. When we talk about local authorities, we're not necessarily... local authorities work through consortia. That's how the legislative arrangement currently works. So when we talk about the local authority, the duty is with them, so the statutory duty is with them. However, how they choose to give effect to that duty may well be through consortia. So yes, we are consulting with consortia as well. Yes, they will have a role to play, but in terms of how the statute book represents it, it's a local authority duty for the time being. Things may change in the future. The consortium may become statutory bodies in themselves, but that's not the current position, and we can't legislate on that position.
If you look at what was agreed for the consortia in the national model, the national model doesn't include SEN, ALN work, which makes the question, you've still got the staff working on ALN, but it's the rest of the team, the school improvement team, which has disappeared. Yeah. Some of this will have to be dealt with in the code, because we'll be able to issue guidance or indeed instructions through the code as to how this might work. By the time we implement this, given that we're looking at 2016 for the law to be enacted and then implemented either probably 2017, but that's not been agreed. Yeah. We've still got another 3 years at least to look at. The role of the consortia, the role of the local authority, indeed the number of local authorities may well have changed by then. Yeah. And so it needs, it's a moving feast. A moving feast? No, moving target, in that we have, we can only work legally with the local authorities at this point, but we will have to make the code deal with the situation on the ground.
And I think we worked really hard when we were doing this original pilot to raise the status of all things to do with SEN. So it's about not missing that opportunity to keep it really up there and working with consortia, because that is the way forward. We need to make sure that it is really established, that it is seen as equal to school improvement.
Yes.
Absolutely,
otherwise we lose the opportunity again.
Our argument, we're allowed to have internal arguments officially. We have always made the case that when you have 20 to 25% of the school population with some form of special needs, additional needs, you cannot look at improvement of attainment or outcomes without dealing with that group as well. And so we are continually making that case. At the moment, it's not within the consortia remit, but clearly it can't be separated from their overall school improvement remit. But equally, a lot of the people who have been involved in the pilots and who know the situation on the ground, as I said, are still in authorities. It's just that, they will need to be pulled back towards the consortia to some extent to create a group. We don't know how that'll work. We need to see how the consortia develop, how local authorities develop over the next couple of years. It's clearly, yeah, we started at a point where 22 authorities and 8 pilots. You know, we may not have, we could theoretically have only 8 local authorities by the time we get to 2017, 2018. This all needs to be worked out as we go along.
Dwi'n rhagwaith droswch yn defnyddio'r term angen dysgu ychwanegol. Yn rhannol achos tan y papur gwyn yma, ni'n edrych ar angen y dysgu ychwanegol fel yr 17 grŵp gael ei ddiffinio yn y ddogfen Pebbles 2007. Os yna cynlluniau, fi'n deall yr angen am newid, ond dwi hefyd yn gweld bod dryswch rhwng y ddau beth, achos mae'r ddau beth i fi yn golygu dau beth eitha gwahanol. Os yna cynlluniau i wneud
pontio... I didn't quite make that, but we're talking about post... Ruth, Paul, you made a bit more sense than I did, I'm sorry.
Yes. Is different to the definition of ALN we were told in 2007 in the Pebbles document. It's very different.
Pebbles wasn't obviously a legal document, it was guidance, and we had, you know, Pebbles did take a very wide view. And
what we're proposing here, we're talking about the SEN population and renaming it ALN, and I see a need for that. I'm not saying that's not, but it is going to create confusion and needs to be simple transition between the old definition as we see ALN and the new.
Yes.
I mean, that needs to be made very clear, otherwise we're talking about IDPs.
Indeed. I mean, in terms of Pebbles, that will be revised so that the term additional learning needs, which appears at the moment and appears to refer to all those groups, will no longer do that. Will be appropriated in the term, if you like, specifically for those who are, by and large, currently have SEN. I mean, one of the things that we will need to do is to any change that we make will need to be publicised and promoted so that everyone understands what this term is and who it refers to, and that past association doesn't continue. But
particularly because it has major connotations for the role of the electorate.
Indeed,
yes.
Absolutely.
It's going to be one of these stratified things almost that, you know, we talked about ALN in Pebbles as meaning one thing. We've used other documents, and again the consultation document 2 years ago created additional needs, which we reckoned would probably cover about 60% of the school population on a good day. Once we get to a statute definition of additional learning needs, then that will sort of deal with everything else, but we will need obviously to make that clear. And the same logic applies for covering the post-16, because they've had the learning difficulties or disabilities, or the other way around, which will itself be replaced, will again be replaced by the ALN definition. But you know, we're hoping to bring these together, or we will bring these together. And yes, we will need to explain. That will be part of transition, part of training, and you know, we do need to cover all the points.